As a courtesy, we're going to place everyone on mute until the question and answer time. However, we welcome participation and we'll be using the chat feature and the poll to have a conversation with you as we're walking you through this space this evening. So I want to quickly give a shout out to Housing and Residence Life at Grand Valley and to thank that department for helping promote this event. If you're joining us from the dorms, I hope that this is the first of many experiences that you have with the GVSU Art Gallery while you're a student and after you graduate. We might even have some alumni with us tonight. So I want to give you a quick overview of what you'll see and hear tonight. We will introduce ourselves. We have a handful of staff from the art gallery to talk with you this evening. We'll tour you through this space, and we're going to take a close look at 3 different artworks that aren't often seen on campus for a variety of reasons. At the end, we're also going to share with you some information about how to have a career in this field in museum and collections. And just a heads up, that part is really geared towards students. So if you're past that point and that doesn't necessarily interest you, feel free to log off. We won't take offense. And we'll leave time for questions before we jump into that too. All right, so I'm going to ask my fellow art gallery staff to introduce themselves at this point. Nathan, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Nathan Kemler. I'm the director of the galleries and collections at Grand Valley. I've been with the university for just over 12 years and helped us transition to the space that you're gonna get a behind the scenes look at tonight. So thank you for joining us.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming tonight. My name is Nicole. I'm the collections manager for the GVSU Art Gallery. I've been in this role for about 3 years now, but I actually started at the art gallery as a student. I was a student worker. I won't say how long ago now, but a few years back. But I'll talk more about that later. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I am Katie Pershan. I am the Collections and Exhibitions Technician at the GVSU Art Gallery. I know it's a mouthful, I'll explain what it means later. I started as a student employee here about 6 years ago, and I transitioned to a full-time staff employee about 3 years ago now. So it's very great to meet all of you, and I'm glad to see that everybody's here.
And I'm Amanda Rainey. I am our user experience and learning manager. And it's my job to connect students and faculty and staff and the broader community to all of the art at GVSU, both in the collection and in exhibitions. So art is really everywhere at Grand Valley. And as a department, the art gallery collects and cares for, exhibits, and fosters the interpretation of that work. And that last part is really where I come in. I create learning materials and I organize events like this one and invite viewers to look closely and intentionally at art and to form an interpretation and an understanding and ultimately an appreciation for visual art. And in the case of students and faculty, to then apply that knowledge to their own fields of study. A little bit more about art at Grand Valley. The collection includes more than 20,000 works of art, including drawing and photography, painting and printmaking, sculpture, mixed media, and lots more. You'll see a lot of that tonight. You can find art in every building across campus. We host multiple exhibitions a year on the Allendale campus in the Haas Center for Performing Arts Gallery, and also in smaller galleries across campus. We visit classes, we host events, we provide learning resources related to all of the artwork on campus. There's a lot more information on our website, and I'll plug that at the very end. We're also on social media, so be sure to follow us at GVSU Art to stay up to date on all the things we're doing. So at this point, I'm going to kick it over to the Katie Cam, as I'm lovingly referring to it. I'm going to stop my screen share. And to kick things off, I'm going to present you all with a poll question. This is our way of getting you involved in the conversation. So, what type of artwork do you think is the most challenging to care for? What do you think? got some answers rolling in. I'll give this just a couple minutes. Well, not full minutes, couple seconds. All right, last chance. 3, 2, 1. And it looks like Works on Paper is winning out. Ding, ding, ding for anybody that chose Works on Paper. You're right, and we're going to share with you a couple of those this evening. So the way that you're going to see this will depend on the view that you're using in Zoom. Oh, we've got Spotlight. Okay, so if you are using speaker view, ideally, you should be able to see what we want you to see, which is the camera labeled IDC Cam. Okay. So we are currently located in the Innovation and Design Center. For those of you who are familiar with Grand Rapids, this is the old Ferris Nut and Coffee Roaster building across from the downtown YMCA. The rest of the building is actually part of the Padnos College of Engineering and Computing. So the space that we're in is 7,000 square feet. It's set up to meet national best practices in the museum world, including temperature and humidity controls. In fact, it's one of only 3 such spaces on GVSU's campus. The other 2 spaces are the Art Gallery main offices in Allendale and actually a computer server storage space in Manitou. We are in complete control of access to this space. We use an alarm system, so only GVSU Art Gallery staff and first responders, including the GVSU police, have access to the space. The 2 main areas of this storage space are art storage and then also a designated classroom space. Katie Cam, if you want to pan over here, we can show some of the tables that we have available. And so this space is really for GVSU students and faculty to use by appointment. So if you see something in here this evening that you'd really like to see in person, you can make an appointment and come in and actually look at it in person. We welcome classes, we welcome individual students. Someday we hope to welcome the broader community. And I'll kick it over to Nicole.
Awesome, thanks, Amanda. I think Amanda mentioned earlier, we have a pretty extensive collection. We have over 20,000 works of art in our entire collection. And as we mentioned, that artwork is in all of Grand Valley's public buildings. So what's not on display is here at IDC in our storage, which is about 11,000 works of art. So just over half of our entire collection. It really ranges from all sorts of what you might consider fine art. So paintings, works of art on canvas, paper, sculpture ranges everything from bronze to stone to ceramics, to lithographs and prints and engravings, works on paper, and photography. And the artists that we represent are all from around the world. Our storage, we designed this space to have an open concept in mind. So basically that means not everything is tucked away and hidden, but still stored very safely. And as Amanda mentioned, to the highest museum standards that are set for us in the nation. So as you kind of get Katie cammed around today, you'll notice some things are out, like these sculptures on the left here. Some things are stored in their frames, some things are in boxes, and they all have different reasons why they're stored the way they are. We have a few different areas in our storage. So right now, Katie's giving you a great view of what we call vertical storage. And this is going to be for a lot of our framed works of art. So because we have so much artwork on campus, it does switch a lot. Offices move. New buildings are built. Like some of you might know, we have a new building that's going up in our downtown Grand Rapids Health Campus right now. So art moves around Grand Valley quite a bit. You might see a lot of what we call blonde, or that tan frame, and those black frames. Those are things that are either about to go up or have come down and have been kind of part of this shuffle on campus. A few other areas that you'll see, we have what we call open shelving. So that's where it's kind of self-explanatory, open shelves where we store a lot of artwork that's three-dimensional. We have compressed shelving units that Katie's going to show off in a little bit. And then we have flat files that I'll tell you about as well. I think, Nathan, did you want to chat about those sculptures?
Yeah, yep. So there's a lot of different ways of how this art comes to a collection like Grand Valley's. The most important and the central way that we get acquisitions for the collection are through gifts. These are gifts from individuals, galleries, transfers from other collections like other museums. And so these sculptures here are all from an individual in Chicago. His name is Howard Gilbert. He collected contemporary sculpture. His profession was, he was a lawyer and he had a firm downtown Chicago, and these sculptures filled his entire office suite. And so there came a time when Howard was retiring and moving out of that office building, and he wanted to do something with these sculptures. And the way that a lot of time we get connected to these people are word of mouth. And so we have an alum in Chicago named William Lieberman who operates and manages a contemporary art gallery there. And so he knew of Howard, he knew of these sculptures, and he connected Grand Valley to Howard. And so we went down to Chicago, we met with him, we picked up these sculptures, and they were a straight gift to the university. A lot of the time with collectors like Howard, their true heart and interest is in just sharing the enjoyment of the piece, right? These are people who have sought after building a collection, who find a lot of personal joy in these pieces, know their learning value. And so really they're looking to maintain that, right? They want to move it on to someone else who's going to appreciate and use the work of art. And so we were able to connect with Howard on that kind of value level and make that gift happen. So all those pieces there you see came from one individual to Grand Valley. And as Katie moves the camera back the other way, you'll see a series of boxes past the sculptures that are another recent gift to us that just came in a few weeks ago. And so they're in temporary boxes as we get ready to process those into the collection. Nicole will be going through and her team one by one, cataloging these, identifying these paintings. And all these paintings are from a single West Michigan artist named Armand Marazan. And Nicole, I don't remember the exact number, but over 20 paintings, right? So all came from a single individual who had family connections with the artist, had these in her home. She could have done a lot of different things with these paintings. But for her, again, like Howard, wanting them to go to a place where they're going to be kept together, used in a way that brings value to them in their in terms of learning, in terms of seeing them out on display. These paintings will be all over campus in the coming years, as well as a body of scholarship and work around that. So for example, with Armand Marazan, we have what's called a catalog raisonné that Grand Valley now owns and operates. And that's a listing of all known works of the artist, over 1,000 that we have in a listing in a catalog online that you can go on our website. You can see those works over time and space that way. So there's a lot of different ways why things come to us, but mostly it's through gifts, and mostly it's because they want their collection to be seen and used in meaningful ways.
Thanks, Nathan. I'll send a link to the Armand Marazan catalog out in the follow-up email to this event if anyone wants to dive into that a little bit deeper. So we receive many artworks through donation, and this is the case for this first piece that we're going to take a closer look at. I want to give a content warning here and mention that this painting includes some mildly graphic imagery, and I'm going to put up a slide so that you can take a closer look. Share my screen. All right. So at this point, I'm going to ask for a little bit of engagement again. In the chat, I would like for anyone willing to interact to answer, what do you see in this image? What's going on here? So take a moment to just type a couple words. You could use full sentences if you want. Type a couple of those into the chat. Yeah, we've got Allison. Says white birds. MJ, a city grid. Yeah. So this piece pop up the actual title of it. Children with Outstretched Arms from Megan. Hi, Megan. Shay says pictures of children. Hi, Shay. So this piece, Megan will know this one well. This is by George Vios. It's titled Tribute to Oklahoma City Children. It was completed with oil crayons and photo imaging on canvas in 2002, and this piece was a gift of Dr. Stanley and Rita Levy. So this piece, like the title says, was a tribute to the children that died in the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City in 1995. And with those materials, the oil crayon and the collaged photographic elements, what Vios is really doing is mimicking a wound and a city grid and referencing the grid of the building after the explosion happened. In Vios's earlier work, so earlier than 2002, you also see these the parrot form and other types of birds actually in flight. You see that repeated. And a lot of those are either just white or just black, like a silhouette. And in some of those other paintings, there's also references to absence or the presence of some unknown. And in this case, there's 19 birds, and there were 19 children that were lost during that event. So it's a very direct reference that he's making here. I think some of the other notable features of this painting, the edges are a bit unfinished. You can actually see some of the canvas coming through. This at least makes me think about children having lived unfinished lives. You know, they passed away very young. So all of those elements are really coming together in this giant, giant painting. And we wanted to share this with you because it's a difficult painting to place in a building on campus, in part because of the challenging content, but also because it's simply massive. It's actually 132 inches tall and 82 inches wide. And then as you can kind of see in some of the photographs up on this slide, the collaged elements are actually raised off of the surface a bit. And so it's a delicate painting, which I think is kind of at conflict with its size. It being so big and kind of bulky, you'd think of it as this really hefty thing, but no, it's actually very delicate, which then again, I think reinforces the message that he's communicating with this piece. So there's many artworks on campus that are difficult to put on display for a variety of reasons. And that's really the only segue that I could think of from this piece to the next part of our tour, because it's some heavy content. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll go back to the Katie cam, and I will let Nicole take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. That was a great segue. And thank you to everybody who participated in that poll. And for those of you who said works of art on paper are the hardest to care for, like Amanda said, you're very much correct. And because of that, that is why we have specialized storage for our works on paper. We call it our print and drawing cabinet. Most of us here reference it as our PDC for short. Works of art on paper are really highly susceptible to damage from light, especially natural sunlight. It can obviously fade things. Different varying levels of temperature and humidity can really affect the paper. So too low can make the paper very brittle, or too high might make wrinkles in the paper. And even the slightest touch of water can damage the paper or ruin the ink, depending on what's on the paper. So in this case, a vast majority of our works on paper in our collection are stored within our print and drawing cabinet. These works of art aren't often on display permanently in buildings because they are so tricky to care for and to display in long term. The print and drawing cabinet really helps us keep these works of art on paper as safe as possible. It's very fun to watch them in person and on video at the same time. But never fear, you can still learn all about the works of art in our print and drawing cabinet. They are all in our online database. So even though you'll only be able to see these on display temporarily as part of exhibits or kind of short-term displays, you can learn all about them online instead. And like Amanda showed you earlier, we have that classroom space. We're always happy to pull out these prints for classes or for research. There are about 3,000 works of art on paper in the print and drawing cabinet, and there's a huge variety within those. So what they're showing you right now is part of one of the largest and the original donation of Dutch prints. And we're gonna take a closer look at one of those in just a minute. We also have a very large collection of 19th century French prints. They range from everything from actual posters to sheet music to book covers, all from French artists to contemporary artists. And that's actually one that we're going to look at now. While Katie's kind of getting to the print that we're going to talk about, we have another chat question for you. We have all sorts of types of artwork here in our collection, but what are some of your favorite types of art that might not be traditional visual artwork, like comic books, music, film, video games, anything that you still fits in the artwork in the realm of art, but might not be your traditional. Allison does not surprise me. She put collage. You're right, Maxwell. I did just give you a bunch of them. Amanda likes film designs. That's new in Matthew. Thank you. Doodles and tie-dye. I like that.
I hadn't considered tie-dye. That's a really good one.
I know. I personally do a lot of sewing and quilting and embroidery, so I like kind of the crafty end of things a lot.
Oh, Maxwell, you're speaking my language with action figures. I have so many.
So the print that we're going to talk about, what Katie's showing you, kind of fits more in that comic realm. Thanks, Amanda, for the slide. So we have, like we've been saying, a wide variety of artwork within our collection and also represent a wide variety of artists. So we have everything from local Grand Rapids and Michigan artists to regional, national, and international artists. We also really pride ourselves in representing many of our GVSU student artists, photographers, and graphic designers that go directly through our GVSU programs. So if you're flipping through, especially our online collection, you'll notice we have quite a few of our GVSU students represented in our collection as well. This particular piece is an international artist. This is an untitled sketch by, I'm probably butchering his name, so I'm apologizing, but Julian Penapai. He is a Romanian artist. He created this in 1987. It's an etching that comes from our Cyril Lichtenberg collection of contemporary Dutch prints, a gift of the Brooks family. So like I mentioned earlier, we happen to be in one of those drawers. This was one of the first and largest donations within our print and drawing cabinet. So this artist, while this is an etching, he works a lot in drawing and kind of the comic, especially newspaper comic realm. He's also published quite a few books of his comics and drawings. He often includes a lot of commentary and themes from international current events and politics. And he also references a lot of famous works of art, landmarks, and literature, such as the Thinker, the Easter Island statues, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and in this image, obviously, the famous wooden Trojan horse. Because of his use of a lot of pop culture and kind of really familiar works of art or concepts or themes, within his comics, he gets questioned a lot on the concept of plagiarism. So he's kind of learned to talk his way around it, I guess, and has come up with this word of similarities. So he kind of tackles this idea of plagiarism a lot in his own work, and doesn't really see it as copying another's idea, but more so kind of asks the viewer to decide what the root is within the artwork. So he uses this word similarities, or his influence from another's work. But he does add very clear and new visual elements to his own ideas. And then obviously in this one always ends kind of adds a sense of humor. and something fun to it as well. He is a firm believer that inspiration can and should come from whatever motivates you. And if within creating cartoons and comics, if we were too afraid of plagiarism, we'd never be able to make old ideas new again. And the art of cartooning would be lost without creativity. So I thought this one was really interesting. We have a few of his prints. I like when artists tackle other artists' concepts. I like when artists use very common imagery in new and fun ways. And I liked the contrast from Amanda's huge painting that we were able to show you to this tiny, what would you say, Katie, right there, like 11 by 14 inches or so. So something that shows kind of the varying sizes of artwork in our collection.
All right, thanks, Nicole. Katie's going to move over to sort of the other side of our space, and you're going to see this massive wall. This is probably one of the most visually striking features in this space. Is it's the whole wall full of paintings. And one of the reasons why we have this wall is because it looks really cool, but also because it's a safe way to store work. So you may notice that some of the first few paintings that you're seeing here, the frames are really ornate. A lot of these are by Matthias Alton, whose catalog resume we also have. And so by storing them this way, they're guaranteed not to rub up against other frames or get damaged by being in vertical shelving where the paintings are all on the other side of that alleyway, you'll see what we call compressed shelving. This is my favorite part for the simple reason that the shelving moves. Thank you, Nicole. Lovely assistant. So over here, we have smaller works on paper that are not part of the print and drawing cabinet, as well as our photography collection and some smaller 3D works. They all live in those boxes. And because of their size, it's easier and safer to store them in these boxes. And then of course, the compressed shelving lets us save on space. Makes for cool videos too. So we have kind of a special piece to share with you next. And I'm gonna talk really slow and give Katie and Nicole some time to set up the camera so that we can do a little bit of a reveal for you. So down the way, there's this big gray box. I'm gonna mute myself so Katie, you can talk.
All right, sorry, I'm just trying to, there we go, set up the camera so that I can be here. And can everybody hear me okay? Yes or no?
Yes, you're good. You're
Okay.
good. Thank you.
All right, so this is kind of a specialty of my job, which is making storage boxes for weird pieces that we get in the collection. Now this one is by Jane Hammond. I don't know if everybody can see it okay. I'll roll this over there. So for all of you who are saying works on paper are the most difficult to manage, I see you and raise you a 3D work on paper. So all of it that you can see here, this is all screen printing and lithograph that are on it. And it's actually a 3D clown suit. So she actually molded it and kind of shaped it into that. It was a gift by William Lieberman, or a donation.
I'm gonna put this up on the slide too, just as a.
Perfect. So it was a donation by William Lieberman in memory of Brian Cohen and just like his passion and love of contemporary art. So we're very grateful for that donation and being able to commemorate that person. But with my job, I kind of am the groundskeeper, so to speak, with the collection. So my job is when we get something strange like this, I have to figure out how to store it safely. So with this piece in particular, we kind of just made it its own little dresser, so to speak. So we've got the suit there that's hanging on fishing line. Its little hat stays in here, and that's nice and safe. And all of this stuff is acid free. So all of the foam, if we're using any type of glue or cardboard, all of it has to be acid free just to make sure that it's safely stored and that no damage will come to the piece while it's here. And then in here, we actually have little drawers for its little buttons that go on. So you can see there. Now, the hard part is, as you can see, the box is very large to try to house it. So we actually have a window up here in the front of the box. So if we wanted to show the piece off without actually taking the lid off, we have it there. So the interesting thing about this is just each piece that comes to us, it has to have its own kind of unique set of requirements that it needs to take care of. So obviously this piece, it's very fragile. It can't be compressed in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I believe it actually came to us with balloons in it just to keep its shape while it was in shipping. So we actually had to pop those and take them out. But we had to make sure that while it was being handled, it would be handled safely. So, you know, there's a little bit of room in it to sway and to move back and forth. But overall, we want to make sure that if it's touching anything, it's not going to give it any pressure. So again, each piece is unique. If it's a, you know, a bronze sculpture, it's going to be handled completely differently than, you know, something like this that's a work on paper.
Thank you, Katie. I've heard a lot of talk about the clown suit since I started with the art gallery in April, and so I've been dying to see it. So thank you so much for that. Katie's going to just turn around the corner and briefly take us down this last little hallway. And then after this, we'll take some questions about storage before we jump into the next section of our night.
You know, I gotta say, I don't know if Jane Hammond has seen it. She is a contemporary artist from New York, or she's currently residing in New York, but I don't know if we've sent her any images about the storage box, just because the piece itself came from William Lieberman, so I'm not sure what the connection is. Nathan, do you know if she's seen anything like that?
No, she hasn't seen the box that we created for the piece. That piece was on exhibit last year in our gallery. And so we have video and still photos of that exhibit that we shared with William Lieberman, and he shared it with her.
All right. So we'll open it up to anyone else that would like to ask questions. I'm also going to allow participants to unmute themselves. So if you'd like to chime in with just your voice, please feel free.
Oh, the buttons have little clips to them. So they just slide right on. There's a part of the metal bracket is attached to the suit, and then the other little metal clip is on the back of the button. So they slide right in. But it's not safe to carry or to store it that way, just because if it gets moved at all, we don't want one of them falling off and getting damaged.
Very cool. Thank you, Katie. Any other questions? Oh, I see. Just a moment. Maxwell, I'll see if I can let you unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. How often do you need to use gloves to handle these pieces compared to just clean hands?
This is one of my favorite questions ever, because I feel like kind of what I like to call the Mickey Mouse white gloves are kind of something that you associate with museums and museum collections. And I feel like that's sort of becoming a old school trend in museums. We have found that especially the white cotton gloves can actually be really slippery when you're handling things like ceramic or larger heavy sculpture or glass. When you're flipping through paper, you can actually crease paper. So we're kind of getting away from it. So exactly like you said, we go mostly the route of clean, fresh hands, or there are certain works of art. I know, for example, we just got in a new stone sculpture, and the way that the artist finished the stone, you can really see any mark of grease or moisture. So we do wear gloves with that. But I would say it's like 75-25 if you want numbers. That 75% of the time, we're going to rely more so on clean, dry hands than gloves.
That's a great question. We've had some come in through the chat too, and I'm feeling like Nicole and Nathan, probably a lot of these are for you. So from Mary, what is the painting shelving made of? And Mary, you may need to clarify for us. Are you talking about the open face shelving or the vertical shelving where they're stacked face to face next to each other?
And it's pretty quick to answer both.
Sure. Go ahead.
What you can see behind Amanda is basically just a metal fencing that you can kind of see the panels, the squares that it comes in, and we just created a grid shape out of those. The wire itself is a little higher grade than your typical like chain link fence, and it's also coated, so it made it a lot safer and a lot sturdier for some of our larger works of art, like the Oklahoma City bombing painting we looked at. And then the vertical shelving, where all the frames were, that's just metal shelving that's powder coated. You could see, you might have been able to see that there are kind of different levels to the artwork, so they have adjustable shelves that you can put in there. Super handy. It's probably one of my favorite things we got to add to this space when we moved in.
That's a nice segue into some of these next questions from Jacob. How much does the collection grow every year?
That's a great question, Jacob. It really depends on the year. Last year, and Nathan, you might be able to speak about more years past than I can, but last year was a big year. I kind of joked that it was the year of big donations, because we took in multiple donations of over 100, even over 200 pieces last year. I'll see if I can grab numbers real quick.
Yeah, it varies. Some years it's a few hundred pieces. Other years it's well over 1,000. Depending on the size of the collection, depends on, sometimes we're working with donors and collectors for years to acquire a gift, and then they all come at the same time. So it just really depends years to years. Yep.
So I'm actually still working on 2020 donations. That's how many things we took in, and it's a slow process to accession and gather all the information that we put into our online collection. So for 2020, so for last year, we took in over 2,600 objects, and I probably still have another 1,000 to go. So that's a very large year. To give you an idea, this year, if it'll let me do it. So for donations and purchases from 2021, we're at 90. So a little slightly slower pace this year, but we also have quite a few donations that are in the works. So I think it'll be another really great year of really adding and growing thoughtfully to our collection. I also like Matthew's question. How many more works could you add to the collection with this new space? I joke that we felt the space the day we moved in, and that's very much so true when you look at the physical space that we have for more filing cabinets and shelves and things like that. But it really depends. If it's teeny tiny things, we could fit thousands of more. If it's the giant bronze sculptures, 5 more, so it really depends on the size. It also depends on what's going around campus. If we, like I mentioned, we're working on this new health building downtown, which will have over 300 works of art in it. So as soon as that building goes up, 300 things come out of here. So we have a little bit more wiggle room. So it really depends on what's happening around campus as well.
We'll just keep moving down that question list from Brielle. Do you guys ever donate or swap art with other schools and organizations? Nathan, I'll let you take that one.
Yes, absolutely, we do. We loan out our collection across the state, and it has traveled across. Some parts of it is going to Florida and other parts of the country. We've had a painting go to Belgium and the Netherlands and stuff like that. So yeah, we actually seek collaborations to borrow pieces to showcase on our gallery and our spaces, as well as sending pieces from our collection out to other institutions, museums, or colleges or universities, what have you. Yep, absolutely.
Allison, our project manager, is mentioning that the wall that you see behind Nicole is a little sparse right now because of that building project, and it'll get filled real quick. From Maxwell, do you ever go to auctions for art, or do we just get what comes to us?
I can start that one off again. Generally, we do not go to auctions because we don't buy a lot of artwork, generally speaking. We don't have the acquisition funds, the resources to go out and purchase a lot of pieces at auctions. Most of our collection is gifted to us from individuals. If we do make purchases, usually it's from individual artists or galleries we work with, not at auctions.
I also mentioned there's value in buying directly from artists. Like anything, if you cut out the middleman, then the actual maker of the work is benefiting most from that purchase.
I'll also say that we do purchase a lot from students who come from or who graduate from the art gallery. There's several pieces actually in the collection from me that I did during my senior thesis exhibit. And we have a very strong history of purchasing work and going to exhibits from photography and from different art programs to make sure that we're supporting our alumni and our wonderful student body.
Thank you, Katie. Great question from Jacob. How do you decide which pieces of art go up on campus? If Allison was officially a part of our presentation, I would ask her to comment on this one. But Nathan or Nicole, do you want to jump in?
I could do my best Allison impression. So we connect our collection very intentionally with different fields of study across campus. So for example, if you go into Lake Huron Hall that just got renovated, our English department is there, as well as our classics department. And so the majority of the work that you're going to see in that space has some sort of connection to that field of study, because one of our callings here is to have the artwork come alongside and support academic learning. So we want to provide our faculty and our students with all kinds of visual literacy resources to use the collection in really meaningful ways. So that we do make those direct connections across campus in that way. But we also have we have higher values and goals of the collection that we align with the university, things along social justice, human empathy, inclusion, greater concepts and values that we also want represented across campus. And so you'll see that almost every building you'll go to, you'll see some of those stories come through and perspectives.
Thank you, Nathan. MJ's asking, and Katie kind of touched on this, if it's true that students at Grand Valley in the art program can create pieces their last year that can potentially be displayed on campus. That, if it's a fable or not, is very true. What you're actually seeing and hearing is that those students whose artworks we purchase have most likely been working on those pieces for a long time, or the ideas for those pieces, they've been working on those for a long time. And so that work is going into their final exhibition, their thesis show. And for anyone that's not an art major, that's like the biggest last thing that you do. So if you're like in education, it's like your student teaching, or it's like your thesis paper that you have to write, like a big research type project. So the work has been produced or thought about for a long time, not just that last year. And sometimes it is purchased by the art gallery and it may go into a building somewhere. All of the work goes into our online database, so it's accessible even if it's not up in a building somewhere. There's a link to Lake Huron Hall on our website that Allison posted. Thank you, Allison. Yeah, shout out to Nathan's wallpaper. All right. I'm checking the time. Thank you everyone for the questions. I will follow up with everyone that participated tonight with an email. There will be a survey in there, but there'll also be our contact information. So what I want to say here is if you have follow-up questions that we don't have time for now, please feel free to reach out to us. That's the whole purpose of us being here, is to be a resource for the community. So please feel free to reach out to us. At this point, we're going to transition into a conversation about making a career out of this, a career in the museum and collections field. So if that's not your thing and you want to log off, please do that at this time, and keep an eye out for that email with the survey, because your thoughts and opinions help us to build better programs and more interesting events in the future. All right. If you're going to stick around, thank you so much. I am going to share my screen again. And oh, I forgot this was in there. Nicole, do you want to take a moment and tell us about where people can find all of the artwork, even if it's not up in buildings?
Yeah, so it's been mentioned a few times kind of nonchalantly at this point. But if anybody is interested in seeing all 20,000 plus works of art in our collection, head to gvsu.edu/art gallery. And that's going to get you to our online database. So from there, you can search a variety of ways. You can search anything from those major topics, some of those that Nathan just listed, like social justice, digital media. You can search for specific majors like health sciences. So you can really see those different ways that our collection can be grouped. You can also search by specifics like titles and artists. If you have a favorite building on campus that you love to walk through because of the artwork, and you want to learn more about those specific pieces, you can also search by floor even of every single GVSU building. So I encourage you to check out our online database. We all put a lot of work and effort and information about all of our artists and artwork in there, so that everybody has access to it 24/7.
Thank you, Nicole. All right, we did questions. Okay. I'm going to drop my chat somewhere where I can see it. All right. So this is the point at which Nicole and Katie and myself are going to talk about ourselves. We thought it would be helpful to share some information about how it is that we got into these jobs, simply because when we were in college, we didn't know these jobs existed, and we really enjoy the work that we do. So we're all about spreading the word and helping students and even those who are out of college learn more about how you can make a career in something you love as a creative without actually having to be an art maker. Although it's great to be an art maker, to be a professional practicing artist too, not knocking that by any means. So we're going to kick things off with Nicole. We're going to talk a little bit about where we all went to school and what we majored in.
Sure. So I think you briefly mentioned it earlier. I am a GVSU alum. I graduated with Bachelor's of Art degrees in both art history and anthropology. When I originally started at GVSU, I was just anthropology, and both found myself, but kind of unfound myself in that department. And once I learned a little bit more about art history and the way that we can use art to talk about people from all around the world, from different time periods, I really found my place within those two, and in really melding those two together. From there, I got my master's at Eastern Illinois University in historical administration. It's basically a museum studies program in a history department. So we learned everything from how to build, create, and write exhibits. That's where I was taught all of my hands-on experience with working within a collection and how to handle different types of artwork, from more of the nitty-gritty of how to do research, how to write a grant, and kind of the more actual admin of working in a museum.
Katie, you're up.
All right. I graduated in 2016 with a BFA in Visual Studies from GVSU University. And for anyone who maybe not is familiar with Visual Studies, it's kind of this study of contemporary art, and it goes over a wide variety of different categories. The reason I took it, and don't tell any of the professors this, it had the fewest core courses, so I could take the most studio courses, because as all of my coworkers can attest to, I love getting my hands in everything. So not only could I use the visual studies courses to study my passion, which was curating and exhibition design and research, I could then also learn metalsmithing and sculpture and 3D design and pretty much anything else I wanted to. I was actually one course credit away from getting a BFA in metalsmithing as well. So they kind of made me an honorary metals major just because I spent so much time there. I'm a little bit different as far as the course that I went to get where I am. I was very fortunate that Bev Seeley, the former head of the metalsmithing department, when she knew or when she found out that I wanted to go into the museum field in some way, shape, or form, she let me know about the student openings that were in the art gallery. So I started there immediately and I just never left. They realized that they just had to keep me. But as a non-traditional student, it actually took me 11 years to get my BFA. So I didn't really do a lot as far as going and getting my master's or anything like that. I kind of just threw myself right into the career right after graduation.
Thanks, Katie. And I went to Purdue University down in Indiana, and my major was art education. But when I filled out the application, I chose graphic design because I didn't have any idea what either of those things meant, and I just thought graphic design sounded cooler. And then I went to orientation for graphic design, and they showed us pictures of what that looked like, and it sounded super competitive, and that's not really my thing. So I immediately talked to an advisor and changed my major to just the next thing on the list, basically. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I had a fantastic experience. I was the president of the Art Education Association, the Student Association. And then I got to student teaching and absolutely hated it. So I went and I got a second bachelor's degree in photography at Columbia College in Chicago, and then continued that thread at Kendall College of Art and Design and finished my MFA in photography there. And honestly, I didn't put a ton of thought into where I wanted to end up. I just took small steps in the direction that I thought I would go. I had a couple internships that I'll talk about in a few minutes that kind of plopped me into the position to be here. And that kind of brings us around back to Nicole for our second question. And we're going to talk a little bit about early internships and jobs that really sparked our interest in the field, as well as skills that we gained in those early experiences that really prepared us for these roles here.
So I'm pretty sure my parents are still on the Zoom call, so they're probably going to shake their head at me right now. But I was one of those weird kids at like 8 years old, super obsessed with history and Egypt, but always about the objects and the stuff and the places, not always so much about the people. I remember as a little kid finding the word anthropology and just being absolutely obsessed with it. And it was like, from there on, that's what I was going to do, no matter what anybody told me, and I was going to figure out how to do it. So I guess I'm fortunate in that I knew what I wanted to do, and I, even from an early age, I could kind of start gearing myself towards that. So my first internship at a museum was actually in high school. I actually worked for Nathan in the collections department of the Holland Museum in Holland, Michigan. So that was my first experience with hands-on working with objects, part of a museum collection. I also helped the education department with tours of the museum and some summer programming. And kind of like Amanda, that's when I was like, nope, not for me. I really like the stuff in the basement away from people. So that really helped me learn kind of the career path of more collections versus museum education was kind of the better route for me. Once I started at Grand Valley, like we alluded to earlier, I was actually a student worker for the GVSU Art Gallery, and that was my first experience with working more with art and more contemporary objects. I remember just walking into the art gallery one day and just being like, teach me, you know, just let me follow you around for a day. You know, let me look behind the scenes, just teach me what you know and what you have. And I was very thankful that they let me stay for more than one day. They let me stay for a couple years. So I've really been able to see this collection grow in so many ways. And that's been, a really great experience. So that was my main job while I was at Grand Valley. But during those times, I was also a waitress at one point. I worked at a tourist trap in Holland, Michigan called Windmill Island, if anybody's heard of it. I worked as a page at the Grand Rapids Public Museum. So I had kind of a series of random odd jobs, and I would say at the time I had no idea, or I didn't think they had anything to do with my future life and my future career, especially waitressing. It was fast, quick money, and that's kind of all that mattered to me. But now, having worked in multiple museums in different roles, the way that customer service plays into museums and what I learned while waitressing, I'm so thankful for that job. The way that I learned to work with people to make money really transfers into what I do as a collections manager. I'm not asking for money, but I am that person that they talk to, donors talk to when they're ready to hand over something that's very meaningful to them. After Grand Valley, I went to, I took a little journey to Missoula, Montana. I followed my fiance out there who was going to grad school. I was a little freaked out because there were only 3 museums within a range of 200 miles. So I knew I had to get in, and I had to get in somehow. I was lucky enough to become the curator of collections at the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula, and I was there for 8 years. And that's when I really saw customer service worked in. Like the art gallery, we took in a lot of donations, but it was a lot more historical items that related to the history of Missoula. And so a lot of times I was taking, family heirlooms from people. So people have to learn to trust you very fast. You're gonna care for their things. You're gonna love these things just as much as they did. And you really have to make that bond and that relationship very fast. My coworkers know I don't do tears very well. And I learned very fast to learn how to manage tears and how to help people through that donation process. And I still do a lot of that today, just more so with artists. And I think artists have that same connection to their artwork a lot of the times, that they literally put their heart and their soul into what they make. And I'm in some ways tearing that away from them. But I've learned to talk to them about what their artwork will mean to our students, to our faculty, to our community, and what their painting means, and kind of the larger picture of our collection. So waitressing has honestly brought me a ton of experience that I never knew. So I'm kind of glad I had that now, I guess. Maybe not when I was, hands deep in dirty dishwater, but it works. I guess that's it.
That was great. Katie, you're up.
All right, so again, I've taken the kind of non-traditional route to get to where I am. With my job as the collections and exhibitions technician, that basically means that I touch every piece of artwork that's in the collection in some way, shape, or form. Nicole does a lot of that same thing too, but where her job is kind of overseeing and managing and making sure that everything is tucked in for the night, I'm the one who will be the one who's creating those beds to be tucked into. So with the way that I went about it, this was actually my first job in a museum space at all, or in a gallery space at all. I have, much like Nicole, I have waitress. I worked at Best Buy as a supervisor. I worked at a AAA call center. I have worked as a nanny. I have worked as a pre-K teacher. So I was kind of all over the spectrum, and it was just more of finding a job because I needed a job more so than finding a career that I really enjoyed. So it was, I think in 2012 is when I decided to go back to college and actually get a degree. And during that time, I had one internship, and that was at the Graham for their print and drawing cabinet. And it was one semester. It was there to fulfill a credit, and I enjoyed my time there, but it was one of those where I realized that I needed to stay in education if I was going to stay in a museum or art gallery field. I loved the idea of being around students. I love the idea of educating and really being able to help people understand what art is and how it can impact, versus it just being on a wall somewhere for people to have to have a barrier to be able to see it in a lot of ways. So that was really a passion for me. And I learned that while I don't love customer service, I realized I am not good in a retail environment. I do love making one-on-one connections with people, which is what is really great about the museum and art gallery field. So even though I'm a little bit of an introvert by default, I find that if there's a piece that I really get to talk about, or if I get to share excitement with someone about artwork, then that makes me super excited. I'm also a huge advocate for non-traditional artwork. Everybody who knows me and all of my coworkers know not to talk to me if a new Marvel or DC movie came out, unless they want to have their ears chatted off about all of my thoughts and opinions about those. So I always like to bring a unique perspective to that. And again, for my job, since I do so much, I make boxes like I was showing before. I have to make mounts in case or when a piece goes out for exhibit, and that can either be made out of wood or metals or acrylic, sometimes fabric. I really have to have kind of my hands dipped in every type of field. I also do some of the graphic design for the department. I do the photography for the database right now. So all of the nice new shiny images that people might be seeing in the database, those are from me. It's a lot of fun. But really thinking back on it, the biggest part of my kind of skill set that I've learned how to use or access to this is growing up, helping my dad work on cars. It gave me a very 3D way of thinking of things. And it really helped with creative problem solving and critical thinking from the get-go, because I have to, in my job, be able to look at a piece and be able to mentally take it apart and put it back together and kind of switch it around and turn it to be able to see its weak points and where it would need to be supported and what kind of materials would be best for that. So a lot of times, again, my coworkers, they'll be talking to me about something. They go, wait a second, I just need to have it. And I'm sitting there picturing it in my brain of how I can take it apart and put it back together again. So while I did learn some things in school, a lot of what I learned and a lot of what I apply to my job, I actually learned outside, just as far as like the critical thinking and the creative problem solving, and be able to kind of think on the fly and move around and be flexible with what I'm doing.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, Katie builds some really incredible things that you will actually never see, mounts for beautiful artworks that are meant to be invisible.
If I've done it correctly, yes.
So you'll see that a lot of our experiences are common from one person to the next. Our paths into this job have been wandering. After I finished my undergrad, I did start teaching in a traditional classroom because, you know, you got to make a living somehow. But I also started working at a summer camp for about 4 months out of the year. And I did that for roughly the next 6 years while I continued my education at Columbia in Chicago and at Kendall here in Grand Rapids. And that was really the most formative experience for me that is not in the realm of museums and collections at all. Much like working in restaurants, which I also did quite a lot, at summer camp, you learn to think on your feet really quickly, to work under pressure, to be super resourceful. I was like the art person at camp. So there was a craft house and it was full of all sorts of fun stuff, and kids would just pour in there during their free time. And so I was managing a little like shop area and also managing all the kids that had ongoing projects. And some of them were really serious about their projects, and other kids just really wanted to be in there to enjoy themselves and have fun. So learning how to balance all of that was a big part of my work at camp. There was also a big emphasis at this particular camp on leadership development and simply being your best self. Best self as a buzzword has been part of my vocabulary since like 2003. No, when did I graduate? 2007. And I love that it's kind of like entered our common lexicon because it's such an important part of simply being successful, whether that's in your career or in your life. There's a leadership series that the Michigan Museum Association, which I'll plug at the end, offers for professionals in this field about leadership. And one of the first sessions, the people moderating defined leadership as simply figuring out who you are and then letting that be how you lead which really hit home for me. So yeah, working under pressure, being resourceful, learned all that stuff through summer camp. I'm going to try and go kind of quickly because I know we're probably running out of time. When I was in Chicago, I also interned at the Art Institute of Chicago, and that was also a super formative experience because it was very formal. There are lots and lots of rules. I was interning with the collections manager, so I learned a lot about attention to detail, how to handle objects, how thorough you absolutely have to be in entering information into a database, which took forever and was incredibly boring. And so I have a ton of respect for Nicole and what it is that she does. But I also, being part of the Art Institute, had the opportunity to meet and sort of rub elbows with some really powerful people in the museum industry. And it's a lot of white men, and there's, even if you don't see it, there's a lot of this feeling of the people in power are highly educated and they hold all of the power. And so it's an environment with a lot of stress that doesn't really have anywhere to manifest, because a lot of that stuff, that like lack of diversity and equity stuff, is not stuff that you talk about. So that was another experience that I really enjoyed being there, and I would totally go back if only to help change things. But it was another experience that helped me see what I didn't exactly want at that particular time. And in grad school, when I was here in Grand Rapids, I ran a little gallery, and that was also a really great experience. If you ever have an opportunity to just go out and do something on your own, even if you don't think you have a lot of support for it, find a way to get the information you need and the help that you need. In all of the experiences I've had, I've also learned that help is out there and information is out there. Grants are out there to help you do what it is you want to do, even if you're not sure where to look yet. Sort of ask the person that's sitting in front of you. And even if they don't know, they'll probably point you to someone who can. Just the fact that you're in this Zoom call is a step in the right direction. So real quick, I want us to have time to share our last answers to our last prompt, which is, what is your favorite part of this job? Nicole?
I know Amanda's going to want me to say one, but I can't just say one. That's not me. So I'm going to do my top 3 super fast. Number 1 for sure is I get to touch everything. I'm that person who guards followed at the Smithsonian because I kept leaning over the barriers and setting off alarms. So while I do it all safely and to standards, it is really fun to get your hands on things and learn about artwork in that very physical way. I'd say number 3, thank you, Amanda. I love database work. I love the nitty gritty details that come with all the artwork. But I think it's really important because that's where we store all the information about the piece, whether it's the nitty gritty of who we got it from, when we got it from, but also how old. We collect the artist statements and how they want their artwork described. But I'm also putting words to artists who have, not been alive for hundreds of years and telling their story through the research I get to do and the database management. That's part of my job. Number 3, I see some of your smiling faces on this call are my students and the students we get to work with at Grand Valley. Yay! The work that we get to do and share with them is the number 1 reason that I came to this job and left Missoula, was to work with students at Grand Valley. And that's, sharing what we do, giving them experience for their future. We work with art students, we work with non-art students, and I hope they all leave, learning how that they can use their skills that they learned at the art gallery in their future. And they're, by far, you guys are a huge reason why I'm here and why I love my job.
Katie?
All right, well, I'm going to copy Nicole a little bit by saying the fact that the students are definitely a huge part for me. I still talk to several of the students even after they have gone on and done wonderful and amazing things. I get text messages from them, and it's amazing the relationships that I get to build and the one-on-one time that I get to have with them. It's really formative both for me and for them. I always like to tell them that, I'm learning as much from you as you are from me while we're going through all of this. And every day that I get to spend time with them and we get to educate each other and watch their excitement and their passion grow for what we do is so much fun, and it's so amazing. I would say I'm going to try to keep it to 2. So my other thing is that I love that my job is never the same. So from one day to the next, I will always be doing something different. And that's what I love. I have ADHD. And so if you haven't noticed from my conversation being a little bit scattered and everywhere, probably, my brain is always going in a million different directions. So I love the fact that there have been on several occasions, someone coming up to me for at the office and going, "Hey, Katie, do you know how to do this thing?" And me going, "Absolutely. Hey, Siri, how do I do the thing that they just asked me about?" Because I might not know right away, but I get to figure it out. And for me, it's just one giant puzzle that I get to play with every single day. So whenever we get a new piece in the collection, my first thing is to just, like Nicole said, get my hands on it and look at it and see what kind of challenges are going to come forward with it and how I'm going to be able to overcome those challenges. Because that to me is one of the most rewarding things, is to see a piece that's displayed beautifully and you not be able to see how I did it. I love a mystery.
Yeah, working with students is fantastic. I think my favorite part of this is exactly what we're doing right now, is finding new ways to engage the community in conversations about art that aren't necessarily like, look at this picture and let's talk about it, because really good artwork that communicates and really like hits your heart, hits home, is worth sort of learning the whole world that surrounds it. So how it was made, why it was made, where that artist comes from, what their world is all about, because everything is about context. So yeah, that's my favorite thing, is connecting people with art and then sort of problem solving new ways to do that, and learning about the art and the artists. I feel like I'm just repeating Nicole and Katie. So I'm going to leave it at that. For those students out there, this is a list of resources that I will also email out to you. If you are interested in pursuing a career in museums and/or collections or galleries, or being a professional artist, GVSU Career Center is here for you. There's a conference coming up in March where we'll be doing sort of another version of this with even more people who love their careers and they're creative, and they come from all different sorts of backgrounds. So I think that's March 17th, midday, right? You could always come work for us in the GVSU Art Gallery. Keep an eye on Handshake if you're a GVSU student for job postings. The Michigan Museums Association for anyone entering this field. It's a really great professional organization to belong to. And then there's the National American Alliance of Museums, also a great resource. So that wraps up our evening. I want to open it up to questions. I recognize that we're probably going long. I can't see the clock when I share my screen like this. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to drop it into the chat. If you're exhausted and would like to dip out, totally understand that. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will be following up with those resources and a link to a survey that I genuinely hope you take the 3 minutes to fill out. So any questions? And if you can't unmute yourself but would like to, let me know in the chat and I can invite you to unmute yourself. Oh, can Nathan share his career path? Max, let me find you. Hang on. Maxwell.
I can do it really quick. Mine's similar to Nicole's. I knew at an early age that something about objects had meaning for me and value. I came from a collecting family. They collected old things. I grew up in antique shops. I had a fascination with Egyptology at a young age, like Nicole. And so for me, what got it going was in my undergrad, I was all over the place. I was world history, archaeology, art history, studio art. And I did an internship here in Grand Rapids at the Public Museum of Grand Rapids. And for me, that set me on my path, that brought it all together, that really connected with me. I'm like, okay, this is how all my interests coincide. This is how I can contribute in meaningful ways. And so from there, I went on to grad school in the same program Nicole did, Eastern Illinois University. I worked in Wisconsin for a while and then came back to Grand Rapids. My first job was under a grant project. So it's a lot of time what happens in museums is they get temporary funds for particular projects with a beginning and an end time. So my position at the Public Museum was under a National Endowment for the Humanities grant, and I was there for 3 years before moving forward with positions always kind of collections based. I was always working, as Nicole does, with managing the collection, organizing it, thinking about how to make meaningful stories come from there to share with our communities. So I worked at the Hammond Museum for a number of years before coming to Grand Valley. So that's my path in a really quick nutshell.
Thanks, Nathan. Maxwell, did you have a question?
Okay, so I'm a film major, and I would love to know if there's a particular job title for the documenting process or doing video things like this, or do you kind of just get filmmakers outside of museums and things?
I think it probably depends on the institution. So I know that there are staff at the Art Institute in Chicago where I interned whose only job it is to document and create media. I don't remember their job titles. Anybody else? No? Specific titles? That is a thing. It's a niche thing, but it is a thing. I think one of the pieces of advice that I always try and give students is to think about how you can take the one niche thing that you really love to do, but also make that skill really broad so that your dream job, might be the end goal, but you could get a job that maybe involves making films, but it's social media related stuff. And it's just your foot in the door that's going to eventually get you to the dream job. So with that, I will say that there's a lot of work to be done for just making promotional materials and bringing film and photography into a commercial realm that then I think could maybe get you into that coveted, documentarian job, maybe. Sure. Nicole's kind of nodding a little bit. Yeah, that's a great question. The setup, the photographic setup at the Art Institute is something that makes me drool just thinking about it. They have some very expensive cameras and a massive space just dedicated to documenting precious objects. It's amazing.
Gotcha.
Any other questions? All right. Well, like I said, I will email with our contact information. So if you have questions you would like to direct to a single person, you're welcome to do that. Yes, Nathan is saying, thank you everyone so much. I won't take up any more of your time. Go get some rest, and we'll put this up on YouTube so you can watch it all again if you want. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.